right, sorry, I'm going to switch to English, but good morning, everybody. Great pleasure to be here. And so what I want to say, we're looking at 2067 and what will happen in 50 years. I will speak very slowly. We are looking at 2067, so what will happen in 50 years? And what it reminded me is of something that the Boston Globe, I just arrived from Boston. It's a city where I spend most of the time these days. I just arrived from Boston. In Boston Globe, the newspaper from Boston, the 1st of December 1900, actually 2 pages of how mobility will be in Boston in the year 2000. And if you look at those 2 pages, you see amazing things. They imagine like moving sidewalks, they imagine blimps in the sky and so on. A lot of things, none of them materialize. At the same time, they didn't see all the important things. They didn't see Uber, they didn't see, even all of the revolutions of the past century. They didn't see any of that. And what I'm getting here is that, basically, I think trying to predict how mobility will be in 2067 is impossible, and it's probably futile in the sense that, the future we'll build in 2067 will depend on many decisions. On decisions that, the mayor will make about banning diesel or having this type of mobility versus another type of mobility. The future is really the result of our collective actions. So instead of speculating about how it will be, let's look at what are the key things behind. And so if you look at the principle, I wanted just to discuss them with you briefly. The first one is that we will still want to move. Like in the 1990s, people thought that because of the internet, it would be, there was a famous book at the time called The Death of Distance. So no, distance doesn't matter anymore and we don't need to move, we can all telework and so on. That's bullshit. We are here today, for instance, all together, all of you coming from all of the city and from many other parts of the world, just, to be together. So I think we will still want to move and be together. And if you look at the total number of miles traveled, actually is increasing, keeps on increasing. But that's very human. It's about, we want to be with each other in physical space. The second thing was mentioned before is about this is going to be a big change because, yes, today the road infrastructure is a great source of revenue for governments, for local governments and national governments. Now, if you got different cars, if cars are shared more, if you got self-driving cars that give you a lift and then give a lift to somebody else and so on, then all of that is going to change. I think probably want to think about new ways to finance this infrastructure. Perhaps it's going to be more like, real-time usage, as Singapore has been prototyping, the fact that basically you pay for that infrastructure and how much you use it. The other thing I want to say is that self-driving, everybody expects will be a radical change. But how this will happen is far from clear. Self-driving means that the car can give you a lift in the morning when you go to office and then to your office, and then can give a lift to somebody else in your family or to anybody else in the city. So what you're doing, you can create new mobility systems in between public and private. And the impact can be huge because in the United States today, a car is used 5% of the time. And that 5% of the time is a 5-seater, but is used on average by 1.6 people. So the infrastructure is totally inefficient. 95% of the time, not only the car is not used, but actually it uses valuable land in our cities. It's parked somewhere and so on. So if we change a little bit the 9% to 95%, then the impact on the city can be huge. Now, I'll tell you, however, 2 possible scenarios with self-driving cars. One is that we'll be able to run Paris with just 20% of the cars we have today. We free a lot of space, a lot of parking space. We can turn it into farming, into public space for citizens and so on. And then we got an amazing city. At the same time, some of the predictions show that the cost of self-driving cars today can go down to 30 cents per mile, which means it will be much cheaper to take a self-driving car than to take the underground, le métro. And then, at that point, everybody, if you imagine Paris without mass transportation, then it means actually we'll have a city which is much more congested than what it is today. So those are 2 different scenarios that come from the same thing. So self-driving will change a lot our cities, but the way it will do it is far from clear and will depend a lot on the policies we will put in place. You know, if you put taxes, for instance, on the use of the road infrastructure, we might go one way, or we might end up the other way. So we might have more cars or less cars. That will depend on us, not on the technology. I just want to finish to say, you know, also there's a lot of people excited about in this time of transformation, think about mobility, excited about many ideas, and some of them I think they are a bit nonsensical. So I want to share with you 3 of them that I think are quite nonsensical. The first one is drones. The idea that tomorrow we'll move in our cities with drones, to me, is bullshit. And the reason is bullshit that drones are great if you want to monitor things. If you got a lightweight drone, then they're very, very good. But if you want to move people, if you want to keep my weight up in midair with a drone, a helicopter, just because of physics, you need to move a huge amount of air downwards, very high speed, and generate a lot of noise. Just to give you an example, in New York City, there's actually a helipad in Manhattan, in lower Manhattan, and that helipad has some tens of flights per hour taking off. Well, tens of flights every hour is not that much. It's still, everybody in the neighborhood complains because of the noise, because of all the other nuisances. There's an article in the New York Times just a year ago about all the complaints about this. Now, if you just wanted to have a little bit of impact on mobility in Manhattan, you wouldn't need tens of flights per hour. You would need 1,000 or 10,000 times more that. And, you know, this certainly wouldn't be possible. It would make the city totally unlivable. So the first thing I want to share with you is drones, great. You can use them in places where there's no infrastructure. They can use them for small drones to monitor the city. But really to think about the city of moving, you know, kind of the Jetsons is one of those old dreams, but, you know, I don't think that will happen. The second thing I want to share with you is I think also Hyperloop to me looks like a bit of a hoax. And the reason is that if you think about Hyperloop just in terms of experience of travel, think about you know, going from London to Paris. The beautiful thing of the Eurostar is that you start from the center of the city, you get out in the center of the other city, and it's a few hours, you got the most beautiful office in the world, you can work on your computer, and you know, you're connected and so on. The thing about what Hyperloop is proposing is to go outside the city to like an airport, which is a big exchange. The big exchange, they put you into capsules and they shoot you to the other city. Well, you get to another big exchange outside the city, and then you will need to commute to the city center. So it's nothing different than what happens today if you go to Charles de Gaulle, you wait for like a capsule for a plane, and then you go to London, and then you get from Heathrow to the city center. It's exactly the same and exactly the same time. So what it's doing is redoing, in terms of experience, is redoing the same experience of the plane with the only difference is has a higher capex, it costs a bit more to build, and the lower OPEX, so it costs a little bit less to operate. But if the experience is the same and you need to build these kind of giant exchanges outside the cities, I mean, I'm not really sure it will be, maybe it will work in a few places, but you know, I'm not really sure it's going to be the mobility solution of tomorrow. And the final thing I want to mention is not part of our panel, so I'm going to get out of the boundaries we were given. But before it was mentioned is about urban farming. I think urban farming is amazing, don't get me wrong, but we will never be able to feed a city with the footprint of the city. There's simply not enough energy coming from the sun. You know, if you want to feed Manhattan, you need the amount of ground you need to farm is really, really large. What you can do, yes, you could say, okay, well, we can also do skyscrapers and use artificial lighting and grow everything there, but then it becomes incredibly inefficient in terms of energy. Because if you do that, if you want to make it sustainable, you need to have photovoltaics, get the energy from the sun, then turn that energy into an LED, and the efficiency you get there is 5% more or less, and then produce vegetables. So I think we can do that in small pockets and so on, but again, to me, the beauty of urban farming, and I'm totally for it, is the fact that it connects us with nature, with seasons, with the magic of life, of nature around ourselves. But it's not, you know, we cannot think about tomorrow when we'll be able to feed all of Paris or all of Manhattan with urban farming. So those were kind of the 3 myths I wanted to dispel and start the conversation.